Sports Nutrition for Teens, where we talk all things food, sports, and nutrition for peak athletic performance. I'm your host, Liz, a registered dietitian, nutritionist, and youth sports mom. This podcast is for teenage athletes because teenagers are unique. You are still growing, developing, and you're pushing yourself to your absolute limit, both physically and mentally training and competing in your sport. Join me as we talk with expert sports dietitians from around the world who work with the biggest and best athletes. Together, we will simplify nutrition so that you can apply it to your busy, sporty teenage life. We'll learn how you can eat in order to take your game to the next level. This is not your mama's podcast, but she is welcome to join us. Stay tuned to find out how to eat well, feel good, and look great to be the best athlete that you can be.
This is my time. This is my time.
Welcome. Today we are joined by Kelly Murphy. She is a registered dietitian and sports and strength and conditioning coach. She has worked at the college level, both with D1 and D2 athletes. She herself was a D1 soccer player in college and has tons of great information to share with us today. Kelly, we're so excited you're here. Thank you for joining me. Please, I would love to get more details on your career thus far, starting from your college career.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here. So like you said, I grew up playing soccer and was a collegiate soccer player. So I played up at Cornell University and I was a goalkeeper up there. And I played for 4 years. And after that, I studied nutritional sciences there and went and did my dietetic internship down in Dallas, Texas at Baylor University Medical Center. My dream was to go into sport nutrition, but at that time, decided to kind of stay and work a little bit more in the clinical realm. So I got experience in a big hospital and a small hospital. And then I started working with some people in the community who knew me. So I started doing a little bit of wellness with individuals and some companies. And then they figured out that I played sports in college and they asked if I could train them also. So I started doing some group fitness classes with them as well and realized that coaching was something that I enjoyed. And I really missed the college athlete environment. And I really missed working with athletes, the intensity of them, and just like the drivenness of working with athletes. So I went and got my master's degree up at Columbia University, and I started interning in their strength and conditioning department when I got up there. And I did a little bit with nutrition with them as well, but primarily strength and conditioning. And so applied exercise physiology was my master's so that I could kind of get an understanding a little bit more of the body and start to coach. From there, I got an opportunity down at Duke University. So moved down to Raleigh and was able to work at Duke for a year in what they call the Olympic sports. So there's football, there's basketball, and then everybody else is kind of bundled under Olympic sports. So I worked primarily with them, and I worked with a lot of the different sports teams there, just assisting their strength and conditioning coaches. And then from there, I got a job at a Division II school in Wilson, North Carolina called Barton College. And since it was a small school, there were only 2 of us that were strength coaches. And so I also was a full-time sport dietitian and ended up teaching in their nursing school as well as an adjunct professor for nutrition. So I was teaching, I was coaching, and I was doing sport nutrition as well with a bunch of I worked with 14 of the 22 sports when we were there. So everyone from track, throwers, cross country, I worked with soccers and lacrosses and tennises and golfs and all the sports that you can think of. And then I ended up going up to Virginia Tech after that. And so originally I was pulled on as just a strength and conditioning coach. So I worked with volleyball, softball, and men and women swimming and diving. And then started using a little bit more of my nutrition background and was there for 4.5 years. And by the end of it, I was doing nutrition as well. So after the first 2 years, started doing nutrition. So finished up working with primarily softball and volleyball, and then being a full-time sport dietitian. Volleyball was my main sport, and then I assisted with swim and dive and softball as well. So had the whole spectrum there. And then after working in college for a number of years, I decided to kind of step away. And so right now I'm down in Raleigh, and I'm still working with elite level athletes, but I'm doing it more in the private sector. So working with both coaching, strength and conditioning, and also sport nutrition with athletes, elite level, primarily high school and college, but also some younger athletes as well.
Kelly, that is incredible. You have been and done so many different things with athletes. We're talking today to teenagers, people who are about to step into this realm that you have extensive experience with. What kind of inspired your nutrition interest in sports?
So I remember growing up playing soccer. I was playing it all the time. And in the 7th grade, I remember one of my coaches told me, he was like, before we go to this tournament, which was some random tournament, I don't even know what it was. He said, I don't want any of you guys drinking any soda or eating any candy the week before. And like, that wasn't something I ate all the time. Like my parents didn't give us like candy and soda all the time, but I mean, every once in a while, we were pretty a typical American family. And I remember that was the first time that I kind of like connected that like what I ate and my performance, that they were correlated. And I'd never thought about that before. So from that point on, it started just like, it made me think, and so I kind of got into it. And then a little bit more when I was in high school, trying to play in college. That was just something that was really interesting to me. And so that kind of like spurred me on to kind of learn more about it. And I was always interested in our bodies and how they worked. And trying to figure out kind of the connection between what we ate and how it functioned. But it definitely started when that coach said that way back when.
Yes, and that is critical because you were, what'd you say, 7th grade?
Yep.
So you're just about to be having these major physiologic growth period and changes in your body, and you were kind of made aware of this really important piece to becoming a successful athlete, which obviously served you really well. I would love to hear from you. Why do you think it's important for teenagers who maybe are a little bit too cool for nutrition right now to think about what they're eating?
I think, yeah, like I'm very fortunate because I think it's really easy to grow up like you eat every day and you make these decisions every single day. But I think very infrequently do we sit down and kind of think. It's just normal. You just eat and because you have to. And I think that comment even making me stop and think that there's more to it than just like getting full and moving on for the rest of my day. I think as athletes, that's really important because the food that we eat and the timing that we eat it, it all impacts our performance. And so beginning to understand, even as young, like I don't think you're ever too young to understand nutrition at some level. And so the younger you can understand just the parts of it and how it impacts your body, I think that really serves you well because you can start to make more informed choices, just like training. I think that if you just showed up every day at practice and just started doing random things, then, I mean, you might get better at your sport, but just showing up and doing something doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to optimize your performance or make it to a certain level. And even as a strength and conditioning coach, if I just threw a workout at everybody and it was the same workout, then you might get a little bit better just from doing work, but you're not necessarily going to optimize your performance. The nutrition is the same thing. If we're not thinking about it and thinking of the connection of what we put in our body and how it affects us, we might be able to get by and you're doing fine. But I think that as teenagers, if you start to be able to put that like the pieces together of, hey, if I do like these certain things have this function or this role in my body, and that can actually help me in my sport, just like certain training or certain practice styles, I think all those can come together to start to optimize your performance.
Yes, I love what you said. You're never too young. And as a mom of youth athletes, one of the reasons I find what you do so important is that it's hard to know what to do next. Okay, so they're never too young, I think I 100% agree. It's at any point a student athlete can start learning about nutrition and optimizing their performance with sports. So where do you recommend, like, where can these athletes go? What do you recommend for the younger athletes who aren't at the collegiate level yet? They don't have you employed at their university showing them what to do. What resources do you recommend for teenage athletes?
I think that, I mean, there's a lot of information out all of the places that you can get with nutrition. And honestly, my biggest recommendation is to find a registered dietitian near you that you can meet with one on one, because I think that understanding nutrition and being able to make practical changes and implement them, it takes someone walking with you, because there's a lot of garbage out there, and it's really hard to kind of sift through what's true and what's not, especially when you're at a point where you're not going to read scientific articles on Google Scholar and be able to understand what it's talking about. You really need someone who's understands the information, understands your schedule, understands you as a person, and can kind of talk through. Because when I work with athletes one on one now, what works for someone might not work for somebody else. Like, there's some people who wake up in the morning starving. There are other people who wake up in the morning and they feel like they're going to throw up. I can't tell them the exact same thing, go eat before you train. Like, yes, you need to eat before you train, but what I tell one of them versus the other one is going to be wildly different based on who they are, even though they're both important. So finding someone that you can work with one-on-one, that's credible, that has an RD, that can go and kind of talk through that, I think that's my biggest piece of information, or my biggest recommendation, I guess.
You said registered dietitian. So I'm a registered dietitian, you're a registered dietitian. Let's just flesh that out a little bit, because some people have never heard that before, because there's a lot, I agree with you, a lot of garbage, a lot of people, anyone who eats tends to think they're really knowledgeable about what they're doing. But what's special about a dietitian, and specifically a sports dietitian?
So for a dietitian, in most places, not every place, but most place, anyone can kind of call themselves a nutritionist or a nutrition coach, and those typically don't have any rules. But if you're a registered dietitian, you had to have gone to college in a 4-year credible school that had specific recommendations. So for me specifically, nutritional sciences was my undergraduate major, but that didn't necessarily meet all of the dietetics requirements. So I had to do additional like counseling classes and various upper level nutrition in order to qualify as dietetics. And then once you do that, you're allowed to apply to what they call a dietetic internship. And so when I did it, there used to be about 250. There are a few more now, but it's a match-based system. So you either get matched to one program or none. And then you go, and after fulfilling the 1 or 2 year long, depending on the program, dietetic internship, which has specific qualifications, then you're allowed to sit for your board exam. And then after that, you have to maintain a certain level of continuing education requirements. So there's a breadth of knowledge you have to understand and be able to go through specific training as well to become a dietitian, versus just saying like, hey, I know about nutrition and I've done a lot of my own research. Specifically in sport nutrition, so I work in sport. Like, I've had a lot of specific experience in this realm. In order to there is like a specific credential that comes along with sports dietetics. And I haven't even, the years I've been in there, I haven't even met that as well. So there's certain numbers. So some people can even go beyond the registered dietitian and go further and sit for another exam. But it takes years of supervised practice before you can actually get to that point. But a registered dietitian at least says that they've had at least 3 years of training, if not more, before they actually start giving nutrition advice one-on-one to someone.
And as youth athletes, it's so critical that their information they're getting is medically sound. And for any parents listening, it's really important that you connect with somebody who, because part of what we do as dietitians is make sure that your athlete not only performs their best, but optimizes health along with that. And in this period of growth, there's really nothing more important we can do for our youth athletes than make sure that they get what they need. And part of the danger of not having a dietitian is potentially leading to chronic illness for these kids' lives by having inadequate nutrients, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that big picture is really important to see when you're looking at athletes. Like I always tell my athletes that I've worked with in the past, or even when I was in college, like big picture is like the best athlete is one that can get on the field or the court or pool or wherever you're competing. Like the best one is the one that can compete. And so the baseline foundation is first, like, are you healthy enough to compete? And that means physically, and also means physiologically, like internally, like are you well? Do you have energy to be able to compete? Are you like, do you have issues? Do you have GI issues that are inhibiting you? Like there are a lot of other things that impact for you being able to compete and being able to make sure that health is first and foremost there, then you can optimize performance on top of that.
Yeah, definitely. That's great. So I want you to tell us a little bit more. You mentioned that you're in Raleigh and you are seeing private clients. How can people find you specifically if they're interested? They have an athlete. Do you do virtual? Are you only in Raleigh? What services are you offering right now?
Yeah. So right now I'm in Raleigh. I work. So if you're in the Raleigh area, I'll meet one-on-one with individuals here. I have my website's coachkellymurph.com. My Instagram handle is the same. That's kind of where that came from. Most people call me Coach Kelly because of the strength and conditioning thing. So it kind of goes universally there. But that's one way. I also do some virtual visits as well, but some licensure. There are only some states that I'm able to do them in, depending on licensure. So I am working on increasing some of those. So if you are in a state that's not North Carolina or Virginia or New York or Colorado, I know those ones off the top of my head that I'm good on. If you're outside of that, but you're interested, I am working towards other ones. So you can always reach out to me. And if I'm not fully there, I have someone I might be able to refer you to that I know that you could work with until I'm kind of good to go in your state. But I've been doing that. And then I also do some talks also. So there's some local Division III schools that I'll be doing some talks with, just like team talks, similar to what I used to do at Division I, but typically smaller schools don't necessarily have the resources to have a full-time dietitian. So being able to talk with local sports teams, whether it be college or youth programs, club soccer teams, club volleyball teams, those are all examples of some teams, some things I've been doing just to kind of have that nutrition presence. And one of the things I like doing also with presentations is oftentimes they're interactive, because I think a lot of times as no one wants to listen to a lecture, especially when you're like 15 years old or however old you are. Like very few people enjoy lectures. So if I'm going to talk to you about nutrition, I want you to show me that you actually hear it. And normally if you like move or answer questions, it makes it a little bit more interesting than me just talking at you about like the things that, it's just not as exciting. Like I think I want things to be fun and exciting and you learn something versus just a talking head at you. So
That's great. That's great. Well, definitely check Kelly out. What are some of the common myths that you're seeing in your athletes, the elite athletes, even? So these are people who have already been pretty successful, but what are some of the things that you're seeing in athletes that you're having to kind of help correct?
I think one of the things that I see often is a lot of people, they get to the elite level and they've been doing what they've been doing forever. And oftentimes I hear that, oh, I can't tolerate food before I train. Or it doesn't make a difference for me. And I think that that's one of the myths that takes a lot to work on. But I think that, I mean, research shows that if you have something before you train, there is a positive impact. And so I think what that kind of stems from is, can we work together to actually figure out, what does the timing look like? What does the substance look like? Like there's a lot to be said that you can like kind of dig through in that, because I think globally, big picture, most elite level athletes don't consume enough for them to be able to perform optimally. And I think oftentimes people hear that and they think that it's a universal, like everyone just needs to eat more. And like, especially for teenagers, like that's kind of scary. Like you don't want to just like eat more, because that could come with a whole lot of negative implications that you don't want. And so I think that, again, working with a dietitian to figure out what I'm going to tell if you need to eat more, whether you're an athlete or you have a medical condition. So like, for example, if someone is going through chemotherapy, oftentimes they're not eating enough. What I would tell someone going through chemotherapy versus someone who's playing elite level athletics is going to be wildly different because their needs are different. Do they both need to eat more? Absolutely. But I know that the body composition and the fueling strategies that are needed in order to help an elite level athlete compete at their best is going to be different than the needs of someone who might not be eating for a medical reason. So when I say eat more, it's going to look different and it needs to be scaled different because not everyone has the exact same needs. So one of the things that comes as a result of not eating enough typically comes with eating surrounding training and particularly before training. And I think oftentimes people think, well, it doesn't affect me. I feel the same if I eat or if I don't eat, or like my stomach hurts if I do eat, but it doesn't affect me. But it does affect you, even if you don't feel the difference. And it could be that fraction that like allows you to do that much better when you compete. One of my favorite like anecdotes, which I will use this for forever. And we had an intern at a previous school that I worked at, a strength and conditioning intern. She was a collegiate soccer player. And I told her I'm going to use this story forever because it was like, it helped kind of show sport nutrition and what it does. But she came in the morning and was doing strength and conditioning coaching. So she woke up at 6 a.m., ate a little something, went, and then at 11, she had to go run her fitness test. Meanwhile, I had been running with her in the summer. I knew how fit she was, right? She's extremely fit. She goes out, she runs this fitness test, and she comes back in and looks like just miserable. And so I asked her, I was like, what happened? She was like, I failed it. I said, how did you fail it? Like, you're very fit. How did you fail this fitness test? She was doing it by herself. She had, I think, 5 runs to get in a certain amount of time, which I knew there was no problem that she could do it based on what I'd seen her do. She's like, no, I failed it. I was like, there's no way. So finally I sat down with her. I'm like, walk me through your day. She's like, I woke up at 6. I had X, Y, and Z for breakfast. I went and I coached on the floor for 4 hours. And then I had some energy bites that were protein, that was like peanut butter and protein powder, basically. And she had like maybe 8 to 16 ounces of water. And then she went and she ran this fitness test. And I was like, okay, everything that she did set her up for failure. So I said, okay, that was a Tuesday. Said on Friday, you're going to run it again. And we sat down and she had the exact same schedule in the weight room. So I said, all right, what does your morning look like? And we went through her breakfast. We went through what her hydration needed to be. We went through what was a better pre-training, like a pre-run fueling strategy, all of the above. She went, she ran it. She came back. She was like, I passed 5 and like wasn't even working hard. Like no problem at all. She did not get more fit between Tuesday and Friday. It was the exact same thing, but and she was smart. She was an upperclassman, D3 female soccer player. Like she knew what she was doing and she had a general understanding of the body. But she just didn't strategically time it right. And so I think that goes to show like, there's a lot of small things you can do. And what you have before you train makes a really big impact on it. She felt the exact same going in both days, right? It was normal for her. She just had to go run this. She's already stressed about the test, right? That she was doing. Right. But the only difference was the planning that she had going up to it. And so that being said, I think it's important to know that you might not always feel different, but the way that you fuel or the strategy you have before you go train can make such a big difference. And so figuring out how to get that in and how to optimize that can really set you up for success.
That is a great story. That's exactly it, right? And I think there are so many athletes, especially in their teenage years, that have no idea that they could improve their performance significantly. Not just small, like this is pass fail, right? She didn't pass on Tuesday or Wednesday, and she did pass on Friday. And that difference is what opens opportunity. And so I think that is such a great example of how nutrition can really transform someone's athletic career. and make it more enjoyable.
Yeah, absolutely. She was so much happier when she passed it. I mean, she
Yeah.
still had to run a fitness test, so like that's never fun, but
Right.
it's a lot different when you feel like she felt good doing it versus she felt not great on Tuesday going into it. And then during the run, she felt not great while she was running because she didn't have anything to give, essentially. Versus like
Right.
later, she felt fast and she was fast.
And how much time do you think you spent with her? Like, how much time do you think? Because these teenagers, they're busy. I get it. They've got
Mhm.
a million things going on. Their schedules are something else, between school and
Yeah.
sports and all the social things. And I mean, they're very, very busy. But how much time did it take for you and her to sit down and do that?
I mean, we really sat down for like maybe 20 minutes. I said, bring a piece of paper and let's walk
Yep.
through it. I mean, it's one thing if you have something, you're working through a bunch of stuff, but for her, I was like, let's make a plan. What plan you had wasn't the best, right?
Yeah.
Didn't set you up for success. So we sat down maybe 20 minutes, probably closer to 10. Walk me
Yeah.
through everything you did before. These are all the things that we need to change moving forward. And just made bullet points so that she had a plan. And she was like, all right, I have this. And we even talked through stuff. What about this? Oh, I don't like that. All right, what's another option that fits this category? All right, here are three options. What's the best one? And so we used it like that. And it turned into essentially, what is our puzzle? Can we get the puzzle together so that when it's time to go, it works for you? But
Mhm.
it doesn't take a lot of time at all. It just takes intentionality of sitting down and planning it.
Exactly. Exactly. And you will optimize your time by investing that time. You will optimize
Absolutely.
your training and you will exponentially grow your sport. Nutrition is one of those kind of magic keys that it I love that word. It's intentionality. It's being intentional so that you can optimize the time you do invest because your time is limited and there's only a lot of these athletes are working 6 days a week plus. I mean sometimes
Hmm.
more even though they probably need that rest day, but they're working so hard and they kind of think, well, I can't really give any more time, but this is a small magic piece that will make everything else so much better. So
Yeah.
I that's a perfect
Schedules.
example.
Yeah, I was going to say schedules are like the biggest things that I find, whether it's college or high school, um, that everyone talks about. Like, that's the hardest thing is like, how does the schedule work? And like, that's one of the things that is the biggest like inhibitor from success is like, well, I don't have time to eat or I don't have time to make this. But again, like I always tell the athletes I work with, like reactive nutrition never works well. You will not reach a goal if you're just reacting to your environment and to your schedule and what will happen. Because one, you're probably not going to be prepared if you have long hours. You're not going to make the best decisions. You're going to get frustrated or anxious or like don't know what to do. So, like you're saying, like invest that small amount of time to just be intentional with it. Like sit down and think of your schedule. I sat down with some high schoolers this past spring and it's really hard when you're in school because you're not allowed to have food in class, but you have like this many straight hours. And like, if you're supposed to be eating every so often, how am I supposed to do that when I'm in class, but I'm not allowed to eat and all this stuff? Like, it's a mess. It takes a lot of like thinking ahead of time, but you just have to find that rhythm. And once you sit down and find the rhythm, then you can kind of just reproduce that and implement it over time. Because it is really hard with the schedule. Like, as an adult who I have more control over my time than most of the high schoolers. Like it's still hard. And I still have to sit down and think about what is it going to look like. So those that have class, so whether you're in middle school, high school, college, like you have to sit down and have just a little bit of a plan. And that's at least going to set you up so that by the time you get to practice at 3 p.m. or 4 p.m., you're not dying because the last thing you had was 11 a.m. lunch that lasted 10 minutes,
Yeah.
because lunch times are so short. I don't understand that.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
uh,
The time is limited. Now, I love that you have such a wide range of sports you've worked with because I think some people, especially teenagers, think, well, I'm not a cross country runner. So does nutrition really matter? But you mentioned you work with golfers. Can you kind of talk about from a wide range, looking big picture athletes across the board, Is there any athlete that nutrition doesn't matter? And if not, why does it matter for every sport?
Uh, every sport nutrition matters for. Um, and I think it matters because, so not to get too sciencey, but when we're even like training for strength and conditioning, like everyone has different needs. So whether it's power needs, whether it's speed needs, whether it's how much energy, like are you running fast consistently or are you just doing short bursts? Like all of that is going to require a certain amount and a certain type of fuel in order to you be for you to be optimized. So even a golfer, like I work with a middle school golfer here in Raleigh, and he needs to be able to last and have the same amount of energy and be able to produce the same amount of force in his swing on hole 1 and hole 18. So he needs to be intentional. If that's going to be 3+ hours on the course, if you're not thinking about your hydration and your fueling, by the time you get to 18, you're not going to be able to swing the club as fast. Therefore, your drive's not going as far on hole 18 as it is on hole 1. Same thing happens with a soccer player. Like I've worked with a number of soccer players. Having been a soccer player myself, I understand the sport. Like I know what the different needs from being a goalkeeper to being a center mid. Like you have different needs. And whether it's just practice or whether it's a game, those are different. All right. And it's going to be dependent on what are the needs? Like how much energy are you having a conditioning only practice versus are you doing just foot skills and it's a light practice before you go play? Your different amount of intensity that's required at your different practices or your different training or your different competitions is going to require different types of fueling. And so you need to be intentional about that. And so every sport has their specificity that's required in order to optimize it. And obviously, when you get to some sports, like you have to think about body composition, you have to think about intensity. Like wrestlers are going to have a very different fueling strategy because there's the weight component that's in there. And weight class sports there are other people that specialize. That's not my specialty, but that's just an example of how it has to be specialized with different sports. I worked primarily with Olympic side and including, so not as many. I've worked with some football players, but primarily soccer, volleyball, softball, baseball, basketball, golf, tennis. Those are a little bit more in the realm that I've worked in. But again, it's going to come down to the specific needs of that sport, both from an energy and like a physical perspective.
That's great. So for the athletes that are listening, can you give us kind of your 3 big takeaway points? If they don't remember anything else from what we talked about today, what are 3 things you'd like to put in that 7th grader's ear that was little Kelly that they don't forget?
I think one of them is be curious about nutrition. Like there's stuff around. I think it's okay to be curious about nutrition and like it's okay to go read labels and see like what's in my food. That doesn't mean you have to eat it. You shouldn't eat it. Like there's no judgment on it. Like go see what's in it. Just start to learn different words. Like what are you eating? What's going into your body? I think nutrition starts with that. And I think the curiosity is awesome. And it allows you to be more intentional when you start understanding like what's actually in your food. I think another thing I'd say is our bodies talk to us a lot. Like they tell us when we're hungry, they tell us when we're full. And I think oftentimes in like our world, we go so fast that we learn to ignore them. And so whatever age you are, most of the time with my older athletes, I'm having to reteach them. So if you are in high school or younger, like learn them now. Like your body is telling you if you are hungry or if you are full, like start to listen to that. And because I think that's a really important skill that we tend to lose as we get older. So I'd encourage people in that one. And I think, again, like I've said this whole time, like intentionality is huge. Like start thinking about your day. Like, have you thought about, and it doesn't need to be all consuming, but before you start, like if you have a really long day, like did you pack a snack before you go to practice? Like, do you have something for afterwards? If you have an 1.5 hour ride home from your club training, I know that people are driving a lot these days to get to high level competitions. Like, have you prepared for it? And if you're curious about it, like start to think about, that's when you can start to work with a dietitian to think about like, all right, now what should actually be in those snacks? But I think intentionality, be curious, and start paying attention to your body because it's going to talk to you. So you got to listen.
I love those. And for any parents listening, one of the things I want to highlight from what you've talked about is that this is something, sports, they may not play forever, but they will eat forever. And so investing into them learning nutrition is not a temporary investment for just their sport. This is like a life learning skill for kids. And I love that you say that, like the earlier the better, really. You don't have to wait to be ready to go to college. In fact, it's way better to start younger, learn these tools and optimize them. But what would you say to parents if they can just leave? If anyone kind of lingered in on this conversation, what's one piece of advice that you would give our parents today?
I think similarly, like I would tell the high school or teens as well, is like they should be curious as well. Like I think parents have their own journey of going on figuring out food, and everyone who's lived a certain amount of life has their own thoughts and experiences when it comes to food. And so if you're curious, if you have some hangups, if you have some questions or some things that you know are affecting you, I'd say go through the journey on your own and start to learn and figure out your own information. I think that when you start to have questions and doubts, I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing as long as you go and kind of seek out appropriate answers, because food involves a lot of our lives. And so I think it's equally as important for parents to kind of have their understanding, because I think that's encouraging to your teen if you're going through it, if you're learning it as well. But don't let that allows you to be consistent with both your teen. And I think a lot of times people can be on board, like adults can be on board, and then they'll either say, my kids will eat this and I'll eat, and like separate it. Like if you're all consistently on a healthy journey, it may look slightly different if someone's playing a sport and you're just driving them to practice. But if you're both going in the same direction, I think that helps universally across the board.
That's a great point. So as you leave, this has been such a wonderful conversation. You have incredible experience. I hope that many people will reach out and work with you because you have so much knowledge to share. And I know from all the athletes I interact with on a regular basis, this is a piece that is not being optimized. And it could be the difference of them getting that next opportunity for them to be able to invest even a small amount of time into learning, being curious, being intentional with their nutrition. But can you share with us before you go about your favorite snack or something that you find to be one of your favorite things?
Yeah. Ooh, okay. So I am on a big cottage cheese kick, I think, because of all the like trending stuff that's going with cottage cheese. So recently, I always tell people also, like, if the baseline of what you're eating is like protein and color, and build on top of that, like you're starting from a good spot. So with that in mind, cottage cheese with like I normally put frozen fruit on it so that once it starts to thaw, it like kind of like you can like mix it all together and it sweetens up the whole thing. And then I like putting some like nut butter. So whether it's peanut butter, almond butter, or cashew butter on there, that's been like my go-to snack recently. And then mix it all up. What was that?
On your cottage cheese?
Yeah, just mix it all up in there. It's like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, but like in cottage cheese.
Oh my goodness. I'm going to try this. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's great. And it's like quick to make, and I can just throw it in the fridge and it's good to go. So I know that a lot of people, if you want to try it too, you can freeze it and then do the whole like frozen ice cream thing. But if you do that, you got to add a little bit like maple syrup or honey into it to sweeten it up. but
Oh,
that's like the cottage cheese. Have you tried the cottage cheese ice cream thing?
no, but I'm going to.
Oh, well, just take all of that and then
Okay.
put it in a blender
Okay.
until it's smooth, and then you put it in the freezer, and then it has like a creamy texture, like ice cream
Yum.
ish.
Yum.
But it's high protein. It's got some color in there, so
Oh, I'm definitely going to try it. That's a new one. I'm really excited to try it. Do you do berries like blueberries, raspberries?
yeah. Normally I'll do blueberries because they're like sweeter, like berries. You can do bananas too, but if I'm gonna do like frozen, like normally it would either be like blueberries or bananas, like something that's a little bit sweeter. And again, if you're gonna freeze it, you have to add a little bit of like maple syrup or honey.
Okay.
Um, but if I'm just eating it like unfrozen, I'll just put the like frozen berries on there. But if you
Okay.
freeze it, yeah, throw some bananas, throw a little bit of honey, and put some peanut butter in it, blend it all up, freeze it, and then you got yourself some cottage cheese ice cream.
All right. I know what I'm having this afternoon. Thanks for sharing. All right. So I'm asking everyone on this podcast to finish this sentence for me. The best fueled athletes do what?
The best fueled athletes, not to be a broken record, are intentional about their intake. Yeah, that's kind of what intentionality is key for me. If you're intentional about it, then they do well. Those are the ones you see make it to the next level because they got that piece. They got it down.
You are amazing, Kelly. Thank you so much. Tell us once again your Instagram handle and your website so that people can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. It was great to be here. CoachKellyMurph.com or Coach Kelly Murph on Instagram. Go look me up. I'm happy to chat with anyone. So shoot me a DM or send me an email through my website, and I'm happy to chat with you about anything sport nutrition related. I'd love to.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sounds good. This is my time. I'm on the rise. Can't hold me down. I'm too fly. This is my time. Ready to shine. Brighter than all of the lights. 'Cause when it's game time, seconds away and the game's on the line. There ain't no doubt in my mind. Beating the buzzer like this is my time.